Hi, welcome everybody. Thanks for being here today. I would first like to thank all of our CEI members from around the country that are here to join us today. Thanks for being here. Welcome to the Heartland Chapter webinar. Today we're going to talk about two different books by Marvin, Creating Community Association Law, True Tales of Early Pioneers, and Magnet for Murder, Marvin's new novel. Before we get started, Marvin asked me to do a poll for the group to see how you are affiliated with CEI. So I'm going to start a poll real quick if you guys want to answer for me. We got people voting. Give it a few more seconds. Okay. Oh, I'm going to end it now. We've got, I don't know if you guys will be able to see it. I think you will. We have biggest group is community managers, it looks like. I don't know if you guys can see it. Can you see it, Marvin?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. Thanks everybody for being here today. I'm going to stop sharing the results here. And now I'm going to pass it off to Karen. Me and Karen are both going to monitor the Q&A for Marvin today and monitor the webinar. And Karen is going to do the honor of introducing Marvin Nodeff, the one and only. So Karen, I'm going to pass it off to you.
Thank you. And it is such an honor. We are proud to present our very own St. Louisan Marvin Nodeff, fellow in the College of Community Association Lawyers, of which he was a charter member in 1994. He is mentor to so many, including me. He is a founder of the St. Louis chapter of CAI in 1986. And lucky for St. Louis and Missouri, Marv moved here to attend law school after 10 years of a career in state government. As you will learn in this presentation, Marv, like so many, did not have a notion to work in community association law because there was no such thing. Marv built his practice for some 30 years and is now enjoying retirement, or is he? CAI liked the concept of this presentation so much that Marv wrote this book, which is the basis for the program, Creating Community Association Law, True Tales from the Early Pioneers. Marv received rave reviews for this piece of work. Colleagues commented, wow, what an amazing and comprehensive story. I never imagined that this book would contain the scope and depth of material that it does. Another comment was Marvin hit the ball out of the park with this piece. And just as American history is important to modern events, the history of community association law plays a vital role in how all of us do our jobs today. So true. Besides Marv's CAI work, he recently launched his 7th novel, Magnet for Murder, the second part of this program. Like everything Marv does in life, he adds some comedy to this mystery. Marv will tell us more later. Take it away, Marv.
Thank you, Karen. My special thanks to my favorite chapter in the whole world, Heartland. And special thanks to Kathy for putting this program together. And Karen, for your kind words of introduction. I am so gratified to see so many managers on this program, because even though we're talking about the law, the essence of this program, the trail of exploration, relates to managers. And I think you'll see the connection as we talk about the attorney's path. I may have retired, but I haven't gone away. Maybe some of you thought I was, fly fishing on Tonto Creek in the Mogollon Rim. Some of you from Arizona may be familiar with that. Or canoeing down the Current River here in Missouri. Those are good aspirations, but in fact, I've been kind of busy with projects relating to the industry. I published a law review article, something I never anticipated while I was practicing, but it came as an opportunity on the subject of drones several years ago. And I've been called on to do a number of, really handful of amicus briefs for CAI. So it's been busy. It's been good. And today we have a double header due to an accident or a coincidence, if you believe in coincidences, of timing. I started this work, creating community association law, True Tales, back in about 2016, and it took about 3 years. So I finished it a couple of years ago and sent it into CAI, but it took about 2 years to actually get it published. In the meantime, Magnet for Murder, my new novel, was printed in April. So that accident of timing came together. So now we're able to do a fictional, a virtual book signing with a double header. And first is True Tale. Now, for all of you who slept through your high school history class, I want you to wake up, because this is not history so much as it is a story about pioneers, and it's got some practical insight about how we provide not just legal services, but management services and other services to our condo and HOA communities. The idea for this project really started very close to home. I was reflecting on my own accidental, unplanned career path, and decided to chat with some of my colleagues around the country. And I asked them how they got started. And it was, some of them were just comical, but I heard similar stories. None of us planned this. You think attorneys were, great thinkers and we could do strategy. Well, none of us planned it. When we got our first association clients in the 1970s and early 1980s, there wasn't much law to help us. It was not like torts where we had, thick, heavy law books and thousands of cases to rely on. And we had little experience because in 1970, there were only like 10,000 condos and HOAs and co-ops in the entire country. So I decided to interview as many of the charter members of the College of Community Association Lawyers as I could locate and as I could track down. As Karen mentioned, this was created in 1994 with, as I recall, 27 attorneys as charter members. So that was the number I was looking at. Although like so much in the early days of CAI, this number is in dispute. It's unclear. And I felt bad calling them because, these people had spent decades volunteering for CAI, and here I was bugging them to volunteer once again, to be interviewed. But they were good about it. And I didn't know for sure where the project would go. Perhaps it'd be an article. I just didn't know. But 3 years later, I was still sweating the details when I remembered a sound piece of advice from my editor to help me with my fiction for years and years. She told me, "You'll never finish." She said, "At some point, you just have to stop." So I did, and I turned it over to CAI. I was able to interview nearly 24 colleagues, many of whom had retired, and took some tracking down. We're happy to have a number of the pioneers on this program today who've joined in. I'm not going to go through the list of names because I'll probably forget somebody. I think Stephen Marcus in Boston, so all the way from the East Coast to Dick Fiore out in California. And my dear friend, Richard Ekamoto in Hawaii. It's 6 a.m, Richard. I'm glad you're joining us. Several of our leaders and dear friends have passed on: Richard Kennedy, Gary Polikoff, Jim Strickerts. But fortunately, we were able, in some cases, to obtain recollections from people who were close to them. In the case of Richard Kennedy, his daughter Karen, who I think is joining us on the program, were kind enough to provide recollections. And Jim Strickerts had left his comments Jim was so valuable in creating the Yahoo chat group. I think it was about 20 years ago. We're now up to over 700 attorneys and others on this chat group every day. Every day is like a session at the law seminar, and Jim Strickert set that up. So interviewing my colleagues, I asked them, when you survived 3 years of self-torture called law school, what were your plans for your practice? What did you do when you got your first association client? What were you thinking? For myself, I went to law school, as Karen mentioned, 10 years after being in state government. State government was fascinating, a great experience in politics and government, but it really wasn't a career. So I went to law school here in St. Louis. And because of my age, I knew I wouldn't fit in a large firm. So I figured I would start a small practice, a general practice, making sure to avoid things like criminal law and divorce because they were too stressful. Well, little did I know. In my second year, which had been about 1980, I randomly spotted a notice for an independent study. A professor was looking for a student to help a state representative in Missouri who wanted to introduce the Uniform Condo Act. Well, I took first year real property courses, and the word condominium never came up. I had to look it up. But I started and worked on this for a semester. And of course, legislation doesn't pass in one semester. But I volunteered to stay with the state rep and continue to help her. And it wound up taking 3 years. I did a lot of testimony down in Jeff City while I was in law school, and met with, had I don't know how many meetings with the stakeholders, the land surveyors, the home builders, realtors, title companies, lenders, mortgage bankers. It's a very, this bill touches a lot of different sectors of the economy. Now, the legislation passed in 1983, and Missouri became only the 7th state in the country to adopt the UCA. And I passed the bar that year. And when I started practice, I was doing a lot of workers' comp and just about anything else that came in the door and paid the bills. When legislators surprised me, they started referring constituent problems to me. Apparently, they remembered me from all those hearings down in Jeff City. So like I said, my colleagues didn't plan to represent associations. I just told you my story. They all had similar stories, but they became pioneers and created a new field of law. It's no easy feat. I wanted to tell their stories, and I had a sense of urgency because many in the group were retiring or going off the grid or sadly passing away. One thing I learned is that this group really enjoys the practice. They have a passion. We have a passion about the practice. I asked them why. What's so compelling about representing associations? And Wayne Hyatt, the attorney who is our visionary leader, summed it up this way. He said, it's gratifying to help people with problems that affect the most important thing in their lives, their homes. Our practice, Wayne said, our practice has a social component because people want a better place to live. And this social component really affects all of us, whether we're managers, insurance professionals, or others. We help people with things that are important to their lives. We are all engaged with a social component. So I hope True Tales will not just tell the stories of these accidental pioneers, but also accomplish a couple of other objectives. First, I want to invite you to reflect on your own careers. How did you get started? Who were your mentors? What are your true tales? And second, the work is really about CAI as well. CAI supports us with how-to publications, with conferences and webinars like this, with certifications and a lot more So True Tales is more than just a story. It reflects the origins of CAI's culture of innovation, education, and sharing. There was a picture a minute ago, some photos, back up. There we go. Photo on the left in that photo is Jim Strickerts, my friend from Seattle. And I don't know who that youngster is with the curly hair. Reminds me of a line from the Peanuts comic strip. There's a little girl who says, people expect more from you when you have naturally curly hair. And if any of you remember that character's name, put it in the chat box. I want to know. On the right is Mike Nagel, who is attorney in Maryland and now retired out in Scottsdale. Thank you, Mike. Okay, next. I'm going to go to Accidental Pioneers. There we go. Okay, so how did they start? Let's talk about that. When Wayne Hyatt started his practice in Atlanta, he was interested in prisoners' rights. But at night, he served as president of his condo association and began his search for the law. Wayne told me that he had to create a practice, he had to find the clients, and he had to develop the law to make it all work. And the late Richard Kennedy in New Jersey began his career in doing criminal defense work and a wide range of civil litigation. In Boston, Stephen Marcus, while he was in law school, managed condominiums, and condos were just getting started, particularly in Massachusetts at that time when Steve was in law school. And he kept doing that after he graduated, and his clients, his communities, would ask him for legal services. So that's how Stephen got started. And Ron Pearl earned his degree and spent 3 years as a deputy attorney general for the state of New Jersey. But in his spare time, served as president of his HOA. And he spent, his early career along the lines of Wayne Hyatt. Mark Martell in Houston began his practice doing personal injury law, but he lived in a condo and the manager asked him for help on some legal matters. And that's how Mark got started. So the lawyers I interviewed were tickled at the opportunity to tell these kinds of stories. I asked if they were smart and prescient in getting into this area of law. They had a good laugh. He said, no, we stumbled into it. And they had no idea they would be the accidental pioneers creating a new field of law. Well, how'd they do it? So there's a picture. Let's go to the next slide. The picture of the black and white on the left is a photo of Wayne Hyatt and Catherine Rosenberry. Catherine, at that time and for years, was a professor of law in San Diego and was very prominent in drafting the California Code for Community Associations. And on the right, that is Scott Jackson. And if any of you can identify the person he's with, put it in the chat box because I'm not sure. Okay, next. By the seat of our pants. Well, what's that mean? Well, the law was very sparse. Wayne Hyatt said there was little law other than construction law. And the old first generation condo statute said nothing. George Nowak recalled that the real property courses in law school didn't cover condos and HOAs. Seth Emmer recalled that in Massachusetts, there were only 4 reported condo cases. And what cases we had, what few cases we had, didn't address the roles and functions of community associations. They were primarily dealing with restrictive covenants. Mark Markel told me how challenging it was to explain to a judge who was raised on the concept that the law favors the free use of land and that restrictions must be read in a way to give owners the most freedom to do whatever they wanted. Mike Nagel summed it up this way: we were flying by the seat of our pants.
Marvin, I just want to let you know that there's a couple people that have posted things in the chat. As far as the Peanuts character goes, we've got a Peppermint Patty. We also have the curly-haired girl's name was Frida. She was naturally curly hair, of which she was very proud. According to Wikipedia, someone said. And the person that you wanted someone to identify in one of the pictures, Miss Margie Meyer is on, and she put she believes it's Catherine Rosenberry or Rosenberry.
Uh-huh. Well, I thought that was my first guess too, but comparing the two photos side by side, that's good. Oh, well, thank you for the input, Kathy.
Sure, absolutely.
So how did this group of attorneys do this? How did they start out? Well, they became scientists in a way. As scientists, we find a new species. So we take a look at it and we compare it to other things we're already familiar with. We look at what are the characteristics of community associations? How do they behave? What do they resemble? And we became mechanics, looking under the hood and trying to figure out how this thing works. So we couldn't find an operating manual and had to write it ourselves. And we did find unique characteristics. For example, ownership of the property is split in complex ways in terms of who owns certain portions, who has a duty to repair, who has the obligation to pay for the repair, who has the duty to insure, who has the right to use. And we looked at unique functions. Associations are nonprofit organizations essentially providing housing services for homeowners. Owners elect their leaders. Leaders are unpaid volunteers, often lacking in training and education and experience. The homeowners hold the leaders accountable. Homeowners expect a quality residential experience. Well, that's a lot of moving parts and a lot of conflicting interests. Was there a perfect analogy? Were associations mini democracies that were akin to local government, or were they more like business entities? Well, we found many analogies, but none, not one, fit all of our needs. The result became a mosaic of law. We called on principles of law and fields of law across the board so that, well beyond what we started with was restrictions and covenants. So we called on government law, corporate law, constitutional, contract, tort, insurance, administrative, fair housing, and really a lot more. Next. Oh, some more photos. Back up. Yes, on the left, this showing off their CCAL plaques. On the left, Ellen Hahn and Stephen Marcus. And the photo on the right, the gentleman on the left in the tux is Mitch Frumkin. I think Mitch is on our program. Hi, Mitch. Mitch is an engineer in New Jersey. And next to him is Seth Emmer. And in the far right, your faithful servant and my lovely Linda. Next. Well, we were flailing in the dark much of the time. So the tools that this group used to create to develop a law that fit our needs, where we innovated, we collaborated, and we networked. Education has been the foundation of CAI since we created the organization in 1973. The original focus was on homeowner education. So we started off with our first executive vice president, the late Jim Dowden, teamed up with Wayne Hyatt and embarked on a road trip. They conducted 40 local workshops. Jim Dowden would talk about the financial side of associations. Wayne Hyatt would talk about liability issues. But it wasn't just homeowners who attended these workshops. They attracted other interested parties. For example, Ron Pearl in New Jersey. For Ron, this was his first contact with CAI. And in Boston's Seth Emmer went to a workshop in New Hampshire and met Wayne Hyatt. So you could see this is how we're starting to network and find each other. So without much in the way of established law, early attorneys had to be innovative. Mike Nagel in Maryland described it this way. He said it was the unique and unusual nature of our practice that lends itself to sharing problems and solutions, case law, anecdotes, legal briefs, and even documents. Back in the 70s, he said we were all flailing in the dark much of the time. These attorneys turned to other practitioners to come up with creative solutions. Another example is Stephen Marcus and Seth Emmer. They started monthly breakfast meetings in Boston to share information. Emmer recounted, it didn't matter that we were competitors. This circle of lawyers generously shared their knowledge and experience through this network. And Marcus said, I was shocked that nobody held back anything. They all wanted to be mentors. This group collaborated with another Boston practitioner, Henry Goodman, to provide local programs to the young New England chapter. And networks popped up in various cities. There's a story about Mark Markell in Houston and how he was networking locally. But it became a vehicle for comparing thoughts on different issues and developing solutions. And the pattern grew into local chapter programs. And that grew into the first law seminar that CAI had, which was the late 70s, like 1978. I went to my first law seminar for the education, for the courses. I returned for the friendship. And this is a theme that comes out for all the attorneys that I talked to. David Mercer, a Virginia lawyer, said the law seminar, and I'm quoting him, gave us the ability to network with other attorneys and leaders in the country, and it played a major role in the development of my career. Florida attorney Ellen Hirschtahan said it was so good to realize we were not the only ones dealing with these issues. And Chicago lawyer Mike Kim said it was a valuable resource in terms of timely topics and gave us the opportunity to network with other comrades in arms. And this process of collaborating and networking and innovating was energized by an external force, the Uniform Acts. The original Condo Act, we remember, prepared by the FHA in the early 1960s, was clearly inadequate. By 1980, the Uniform Law Commission had prepared a comprehensive update for condos and HOAs. So the Uniform Acts created more opportunities for practitioners to help each other. For example, when we were working on the UCA in Missouri in the early 1980s, Bob Diamond from Washington, DC, who was he was on the advisory committee responsible for drafting the Uniform Acts. Bob was good enough to come out and testify and work with the stakeholders in negotiating provisions of our UCA. A few years later, the Uniform Law Commission asked me, they volunteered me to go out to Olympia, Washington, the capital of the state of Washington, where I would testify at a hearing on their Uniform Act. And that's how I met Jim Strickards. So We were creating national connections, and the Uniform Acts were just one more kind of an external force that added to this. Another drafter of the UCA was an attorney in Vermont named Carl Lisbon. And Carl became a valued faculty member of the CAI Law Seminar, where he could share his knowledge and experience with attorneys around the country. Next. Do we have legal issues or people problems? Well, of course, the big challenge was to develop a body of law that fit our needs, but it was not the only challenge. What they didn't teach us in law school was how to deal with this type of client, how to serve this type of client. Because we realized there's not enough to know the law, because we had to be able to communicate it to guide our clients. We deal with groups of multiple persons, multiple personalities, multiple agendas and egos. And we face different demographics, decision-making processes, and politics. Call it the dynamics of group decision-making. We know many disputes were people problems, the kind of disagreements that arise when people live in close proximity. They're stacked on top of each other or next door to each other. And sometimes the attorney was valued as the adult in the room. Some disputes involve difficult personalities. We learned that some people care more about their dogs than their neighbors. Some boards couldn't make a decision if their lives depended on it. Others insisted on winning at all costs. And sometimes a meeting could turn into a physical scuffle, and we had some anecdotes in the book. Mike Hyman, I remember in Florida, gave us some examples of his experience. So many of the early attorneys described their role in part as social workers. Maryland attorney Mike Nagel recalled that his advice many times was more common sense than legal. Nagel said that being a professional outsider had a calming effect and allowed intelligent and thoughtful advice. And Mike Hyman in Florida said, we're as much psychologists as attorneys. It takes a special kind of personality to do this. So it's in our DNA to analyze and search for effective approaches. New Jersey attorney David Ramsey majored in political science in college, and he found associations to be the most basic level of politics. We turned to studies in body language to help us understand behavioral traits. Seth Emmer and Gary Polikoff teamed up at an early law seminar to offer a new topic that asked the question, what is it like to have a community association client? That's pretty important. So I have to laugh at that, but looking back, that's what it was all about. And CAI published a book, Decision-Making in Communities, Why Groups of Smart People Sometimes Make Bad Decisions. It was written by Jasmine Martirosyan, who was a lecturer at Northeastern University in Boston, and also served on the board of CAI and the Research Foundation. Next. Last, I want to talk about the arc of learning. This story depicts what I think is a dynamic arc, meaning it's still evolving. And it's an evolution of analysis and innovation and adaptation that continues today. And it's not unique. It's not unique to attorneys. CAI has a group of pioneer managers who innovated their own path as they moved from managing apartments and commercial properties to associations. How do they start in this field? How do they approach the unique characteristics of associations? How do they create a curriculum of courses and credentials? And how do they address the business side of their business? So I noted in Kathy's survey at the very beginning, we had like 31% of the people attending, nearly a third of everybody on this conference webinar are managers. So I want you all to be thinking about those questions and think about your own career path. But as I finished up this work on the attorneys, I looked at the same kinds of questions and the origins of community management and interviewed over a dozen of the early pioneer managers and the early CEI staff and wrote a companion piece on that subject. And I expect, well, hopefully that CEI will be able to get that out. We'll publish that later this year. So there's a common thread in how attorneys and managers address these challenges. The pioneers in each profession analyzed the unique characteristics and roles of community associations and tailored their approaches to fit. We innovated, we collaborated, we networked, and we shared. So 2 years ago, CEI presented me with Author of the Year award at the National Conference in Orlando. I was very proud of that. In my acceptance speech, they told me I had like 60 seconds. In my acceptance speech, that was 60 seconds long, I said that the people who deserve the award are all the early pioneers. In my interviews with them, I could tell in their hearts that they were full of pride, that they appreciated the opportunity. They were proud of what they've done and appreciated the opportunity to share their stories. These are the ones we should be congratulating and to give thanks for this story. I was just the scribe. I just wrote it down. I could go on, but like my editor advised, at some point you have to stop. So in conclusion, if there's a moral to the story, it's that the arc of learning has built the foundation of CEI's culture. We're all mentors for each other. And this story is dynamic and evolving. And I trust the next generation will write the next chapter of this story. So True Tales is available in digital book form at CEI's bookstore. And posted there on the slides. Karen, next. Well, the second half of our double header today will be shorter and a bit lighter because it's fiction. It's fiction. Or is it? Or is it? Well, like my practice, writing fiction was not something I anticipated when I got out of law school. So what happened? Well, several years ago, it's probably about 1997, a manager called me for help, and she went on to describe this complicated issue that a contentious owner was pressing in one of her communities. The board was very frustrated and didn't know how to deal with it. So she told me all this story in detail, and then at the end finished up and she was lamenting, really. She said, "This is crazy. This is crazy. Someone should write a book." Well, I took it as a dare. I thought about it and realized there was not much fiction set in associations despite the abundance of material, but I thought colorful characters, bizarre circumstances, twisting plots. It's a renewable resource for fiction. And I could use it to inform the public about self-government at the most intimate local level, using whodunit mysteries, wrapped in humor, and characters could deal with new challenges. They were just dark clouds on the horizon, like new technology, political movements, social behavior, and new tensions. Most I wanted the reader to have fun. A month ago, I was interviewed about Magnet for Murder on KTRS radio here in St. Louis. It's talk radio. Ray Hartman, the host, asked me how I chose my plots. I pointed out my first novel called Special Assessment dealt with an electronic heist of millions of dollars from association reserve accounts. That was 20 years ago, long before cybercrime became such a hit. Ray called it prescient. So my novels begin with the question, what if? At least that's how I begin my thinking about it. The book Condo Kerfuffle asks, should we allow guns at meetings? When our hero, condo lawyer Joshua Filer, says more Missourians own guns than vote, well, the gun lovers put them in their crosshairs. My novel HOA Gobsmack raises the question, what if the national trend of populism trickles down to the neighborhood level of governance? Can association groom leaders for public office? This question resulted in Pinball Lawyer, where an HOA president has displayed such talent, developed such a support that she runs for mayor of her city on her credentials as president of her HOA. Drones have always intrigued me because they're capable of so much good. But what about the dark side? 7 years ago, I wrote The Dark Condos with a board that uses a drone to spot violations, but the president prefers to spy on residents. Pinball Lawyer, which I mentioned a minute ago, opens with an HOA picnic. Everybody's having fun until the homeowners are pelted by paint bombs dropped by a drone. And so I began a new work in July 2019, nearly 2 years ago, asking the question, what if a lawyer and reporter who are total strangers collaborate on a story involving condos and HOAs? What could possibly go wrong? The work was paused, however, in February 2020, when CAI asked me to write a brief for a case involving lien priorities in federal court. The Condo Association was named after the poet Langston Hughes, who, by the way, went to Lincoln University in Jeff City for college. Opposing us on the other side were a big bank, a major loan servicer, and cousins Fannie and Freddie. The feds had filed an amicus brief. Bob Diamond was kind enough to help, and we filed our brief in April. It took like 3 months, and we were very good. Our bottom line was we wanted to tell the court if the bank gets its way, it would hurt millions of homeowners across the country. The other side filed a responsive brief and called us, among other things, they called us officious intermeddlers. Well, I had to look it up in Black's Law Dictionary, and guess what? There's no definition in Black's Law Dictionary. I don't know what it means, but I like it. And somehow I would use it in my novel. Of course, we all know, now that's February to April, and we all know what happened in March of last year, the pandemic and self-quarantine. Our society was suddenly changing. The norms, how we interact, how we work. New legal issues were popping up like dandelions. And I knew the novel had to be set in the pandemic. I chose August 2020, which was a challenge because at that time we didn't know if it was the end of the beginning or the beginning of the end. But in August of last year, what we had was we had testing, we had masks, and we had social distancing. Vaccines were a long way off. People wanted to maintain social activity, but didn't know who was safe to be with. So our local leaders in St. Louis, including the fictional condo lawyer Joshua, got together and formed a task force to deal with some of these issues, to guide our local associations and managers through this whole mess, and came up with a concept for safe social interaction. If you test negative regularly, you sport a blue heart on your forehead, right there, very visible. They were the safe ones. We call them the blue hearts. So that's the backdrop for the story without giving away the story. And we find our favorite condo lawyer up to his neck in these new legal issues triggered by the pandemic and the quarantine. And one of these questions was, do we have insurance coverage if someone sues us? Well, while he's busy with all these new legal challenges, Joshua is stunned to learn his old friend Connor has been murdered in a home burglary. We have people dying from the virus, and his friend dies in a home burglary. Connor was a freelance investigative journalist who tapped Joshua for help on financial issues involving condos and HOAs. Connor had a last wish. He wanted Joshua to finish a story he was working on. Well, for a practicing lawyer, that would have been enough of a surprise, but it came with a twist. Connor wanted Joshua to work with a business reporter named Phoebe Rourke, who was a total stranger. So we have a forced collaboration. It's like an arranged marriage, and it gets off to a rocky start. Phoebe is tough, independent. She's passionate about her work, but Joshua questions whether she has enough experience. Phoebe does her research on him and questions his reputation for getting into trouble all the time. So they both bring strong egos to the table. They both are ardent defenders of their professions. They have disputes about what Connor had in mind, how they should proceed, what strategies they should use, what tactics. They found that trust is difficult. So Joshua realizes that he needs more than a magnetic personality to make it work. He wants to break bread with Phoebe, and he says, listen, we can work together, but I don't expect you to like me. To which she responds, I'm sure you won't be disappointed. So Connor left cryptic tips about his unfinished story, but his trail of breadcrumbs leads Phoebe and Joshua on a twisting path of detours and cul-de-sacs. They are persistent and uncover more than they expected. Virus scams, armed drones, and suspicious deaths. And a shocking warning, they are about to shine a very bright light into a very dark place. Overall, Phoebe's character gives us a window into the vital role of community journalism in our democracy, and that's how I dedicate the story. One last thing I want to mention, I've been asked about the cover art, and I wanted something that would be surreal and provocative, intellectually provocative. So we have Phoebe leaning out of this picture frame, leaning out to the reader. The model, his name is Say Marie, has a great expression on her face. It's like a question mark. I have a story to tell, but can I trust you? So as you read this book, I want you to ask, who can I trust? What can I trust? Who is the magnet for murder? And that's all I'm going to tell you about that. CAI, the book is available for CAI members at the CAI bookstore. If you're not a CAI member, you could also go to Amazon for your copy. And that wraps it up from my end as far as my presentation. Kathy, I turn it back to you and Karen.
Yes, thanks, Marvin. You did a great job as always. Just to let everybody know, I shared the link to the two books in the chat. CEI is offering a $5 off with the promotional code Legal Pioneers 21 if you want to go to CEI and support Marvin's books. I did have a manager just text me and ask if where she can find your other books, because not all of them are listed on the CEI website. So I'm not sure why, but she wasn't able to find all of your other novels. So I will contact that manager and CEI and see if they have any extra copies. If not, can they look on Amazon for the books?
What I do is I look in CI's bookstore. If you're a CI member, then first go to our bookstore. And last time I checked, all my novels were up there. Look under fiction. And it's otherwise, most all of them are on Amazon. And one advantage, if you like virtual books, digital books, then Amazon has most of my novels available that way.
Great. A lot of comments happening in the chat. Marvelous Marvin does it again. What an honor. Let's see, I'm trying to find some other ones that we got. You're a class act as usual. Thank you. Thanks for just being you. That was from Mitch. Does anybody have any questions for Marvin? Someone's just posted Amazon has all 7 books, but if you can find them on CEI, I know that supports CEI. So please look at CEI first. I will try to reach out to somebody at CEI and see if I can send everybody like the direct links. It was fun going down memory lane. Someone just put, yeah. Anybody have any questions for Marvin? Well, thank you guys for all being here today. We appreciate you so much. I wanted to thank Marvin and thank Karen for being here and helping with the chat. Also wanted to let you guys know about our next webinar, Breaking Point, Aging Infrastructures to Community Associations. We're excited about this one. That will be on Wednesday, July 14th.
We
Karen?
have a national speaker, Bob Travis. And all this presentation came from the CAI Research Foundation. So it's going to be a really great presentation.
Okay, lots of people just posting in the chat. Thank you. I appreciate Marvin being here. I'm going on vacation soon, and my 3-year goal has been to read one of his books. So she's going to get one, I guess. That's great. So thank you for doing this, Marvin. Thank you for everything that you've done for the industry. We appreciate you. And for our chapter too, you definitely put the Heartland chapter on the map, and we appreciate you very much for that.
Don't mention it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Hope to see you next month on July 14th. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.